Hey all, so today we're going to take a look at one of the most iconic handguns on the planet, the Beretta 92 FS. Let's get into it. Now if you like this content, like, sub, shares, all that good stuff, I really appreciate it. Also down below, coupon codes and merch to help support the channel. So, the Beretta 92 FS. At one point in time, this gun, or a version of this gun, was carried by US military, police forces, action movie stars, you name it, it's pretty much been in just about every genre, every situation you can think of. It still is, I should say, a very popular concealed carry option. Even with all the Wonder 9s out there, the Beretta 92 FS is a really good gun. And today we're going to talk about it. Okay, here we are in the box, and I want to start by saying that this is an Italian-made example that was made about 5 years ago, give or take. And obviously the gun has been around for a long time, and with that, obviously there's been changes, modifications to everything, little tweaks here and there, the same basic design, but just, improvements or changes basically. So I'm looking at a current production gun, or at least what was current 5 years ago. So obviously yours might be different, or the one you look at might be different if it's a used gun. But anyway, moving forward, we're going to start with the sights. Now, the front sight here is molded into the slide, and I actually like that because at the end of the day, especially, this can be set up as kind of a competition gun or a marksman gun, something like that, something, for basically pinpoint accuracy. But at the end of the day, this is set up as, a self-defense gun, a duty weapon, something like that. So having that sight in there, you don't have to worry about it falling out. You don't have to worry about it drifting. I really like. The rear sight, right, is just a dovetail here. So you could change that if you wanted to, but obviously you are kind of stuck, we'll say, with the front sight. That doesn't bother me in the least. The sight picture, if I can get it to focus, is pretty good, but I really like this deep square notch here in the rear sight. Really makes for a nice, clean sight picture. Now, moving down from the rear sight, we have this lever here, and that is your safety / decocker. So, say the gun was cocked like this and you wanted to put it on safe, you could flip this down. It is ambidextrous on either side. You would flip this down, right, like so. Difficult to do on camera. And it would decock the gun. Now, if this was a standard version, like how the gun originally came, this would stay down until you flipped it back up. This has the G conversion done to it, which some guns do come from the factory like that. And I prefer the G models, even though they are difficult to find sometimes. That's why I had the conversion done on this gun, where basically it is only a decocker. So there is no external safety on this gun. Basically, this is just a decocker, so you can flip it down, say you want to decock the gun, but there is no safety. It just flips right back up and puts the gun back in double action, which I'll go to the trigger now and talk about. So this is a double single action gun. That means that, say, you were carrying this gun, and you had your, either safety down, you flipped it up and you were ready to fire. Your first trigger pull would be a double action pull, meaning that as you pull the trigger back, it would pull the hammer back and then eventually fire the gun. Then as the gun cycles, it would then recock the hammer for the next shot, and the gun would be single action for each shot after until the magazine was empty. Now, the trigger on this gun is another thing that I modified, is they're now shipping with plastic triggers. It's not world ending. I had no issues, but I did spring for a metal trigger to put a metal trigger back in this gun. It's just personal preference, no issues. The triggers on these guns are not terrible. Again, that first double action pull is smooth, but definitely heavy. One of the modifications I did to this gun, and I did a bunch of little minor things, was I put in what's called the D spring. The D spring is basically the spring that they put in the double action only 92s that you're able to put in this gun with basically no risk of reliability issues, and it lowers the trigger pull weight a little bit. So that's definitely an upgrade I would recommend for every 92. All you do is put a new hammer spring in, and you're able to instantly improve your trigger without risk of reliability issues. The trigger pull itself it's pretty good. It could definitely be better, and there are, I've pulled the triggers on some of the nicer, higher end 92s, that have like some better components in them, and maybe have had some work done to them, and it is definitely a better trigger than the factory 92. It's serviceable, and something I've actually been doing is, I'll put a snap cap in and just do some dry fire for a couple hours, and that kind of helps break into components. So definitely could be better, but your double action is long and heavy, but your single action, honestly, isn't terrible. Again, there could always be a better trigger, but there's not really any creep. Like once you hit the wall right here, it basically breaks clean. I don't knock the trigger that bad because at the end of the day, this was designed to be a sidearm, a duty weapon, not a target gun. Moving on to the grips, these are actually some rubber grips I had off a Beretta Inox. The standard ones are plastic, nothing wrong with them, but there is a ton of aftermarket options out there. I like the factory Inox grips just because of that, like neat rubbery texture on there. I don't even like rubber grips, I just like the texture on these. But feels pretty good in the hand. I will definitely say that the gun is kind of wide in the hand. That's something you'll notice. I have big hands and it kind of fills my hand real well, but there are complaints from some people with smaller hands that it's just too big. You can get thinner grip panels than this, and that does alleviate some of the problem. But if you have really small hands, it's definitely something you're going to want to handle and shoot before you go by because it could just be too big for your hand. Sorry, small-handed people. But I like the grip. I like that it's got a nice beaver tail on there so that, I don't have to worry about slide bite or anything or hammer bite. And I'll show that there. You've got plenty of space. Some of these hammer-fired guns, you really got to worry about hammer bite. This, there's absolutely no issue, no risk of, because the hammer is up out of the way. Coming over here to the top of the gun, you've got one of the iconic Beretta 92 features, and that is a super wide ejection port. As mentioned in Lethal Weapon, they talk about, the wide ejection port. Does that help with malfunctions? Of course it does. Although I will say, I've only ever had one jam with this gun, and I'm pretty sure I limp wristed it, but I did get a stovepipe in the ejection port, which was kind of funny just because of how big and wide open the ejection port here is. Basically, it's a complete top half of the gun, and I was still able to get one. But that's only been one malfunction, and I have put, at this point, probably 500 rounds through this gun, which I'll talk about reliability. Reliability has been extremely good. Again, I have had one malfunction, and I have used factory Beretta mags. I have used Mech-Gar mags, which Mech-Gar mags, if you're looking for to save a few bucks, Mech-Gar mags for the 92, very good, very reliable. I even carry the gun with Mech-Gar mags in it just because of the reliability, not having to worry about that. You do have the slide release here only on one side, which for me, as a right-handed person, I don't mind that at all. Sometimes the ambi controls, they get in the way, they make the gun bigger and wider, and for me, I like having the one slide release. It's simple, I know where it is, and honestly, I don't find that big a deal. Some of the only downsides on this gun, because of how the gun is designed, there is definitely less to grab onto when you want to rack the slide. I find myself using the front up here, rather than trying to grab here and have the decocker and everything in the way. I find myself grabbing up here and racking it that way or that way. Sometimes I will do it that way, but honestly, I just find using the front of the gun a little bit better. Because yes, there's less real estate up here to grab because of how the slide is designed. Is it a big deal? No, I don't think it's a big deal at all, but just something to keep in mind. It's funny because the 92 series kind of died out a little bit with Polymer Wonder stuff coming out, and it seems like in the last few years they've kind of come back. Because at the end of the day, these are still pretty light for their size. The frames are aluminum. Yes, the slide's steel. Not far off of plastic. I'm not going to pull up a bunch of weights and comparisons, but at the end of the day, I think this is still a pretty viable option for, if you like to carry a full-size handgun, this is a good option. Okay, so we got a close-up of the 92FS. I'll talk some more about it. Accuracy-wise, really good. Like, honestly, the gun has done everything I've asked it of, everything you expect. That's the nice thing about having a full-size handgun like this, is you've got a nice long sight radius, a double action, single action trigger. Again, once you learn that style trigger, it's pretty good. Is this the smoothest trigger in the world? No, it's not, but you could break it in. You could put some different parts into it if you really wanted to make this the ultimate match grade trigger. But for me, the trigger is plenty good. I realized I forgot to mention magazine capacity on this gun. So they started with 15, now the standard is 17 or 18, and of course you can get extended mags all the way up to like 30. So much like Glock handguns, because this gun has been around for a while, because a lot of militaries and stuff have used this gun, and police departments, all that stuff, there is tons of magazines out there of all kinds of price and quality. Again, I like the Factory Beretta and the Mekgar mags. There are other stuff out there. I don't know how well they do, but they do exist. For me, when I carry this gun, I have two 17 rounders in a spare side of my shoulder rig, and then I'll have I believe it's a 20 or 21 round extended in the gun, and of course when it's positioned like this, that hides really nice. But that's the great thing about this gun is magazines are readily available and they're not terribly expensive. Overall, my thoughts on this gun. Do I think that it's outdated? No. Do I think it's a little long in the tooth? Yes. There are upgraded versions of this gun that have, again, better features, more modern stuff on them, better triggers, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, this is the die-hard gun, the lethal weapon gun. You know, I could run the list of all the movies this has been in. The U.S. military adopted a version of this. Police departments used, guns like this. This is an iconic gun, much like the 1911, that pretty much has stood the test of time and is still going strong. So this is a cool gun to me. Put down below, what do you think of the Beretta 92 FS? Do you think it's outdated? Do you think it's still got some life in it? Do you carry one? If so, how do you carry it? Put down below what you think, and have a good day.